So we start Seder Nezikin with the Bavas, and according to most poskim and even Rishonim, the three Bavas are really one Masechta. We divide it up into three parts, but it's really one single Masechta, and it represents not just the kickoff of Nezikin, but also the essence of Nezikin. There's a lot more to talk about in terms of the Hakdama to the Masechta. Maybe at some point we can look into that. The Masechta has a very fine overview and introduction to the Masechta. In any event, Arba Avos Nezikin. Now, exactly what an Av Nezikin is a matter of some debate. We'll go with the understanding of the Brisker Rav in Chidushei Agriz al Levi al Rambam, that the avos of Nezikin represent the abstract concept of these four forms of Nezikin. When I say abstract, I mean, even though it says habar or hashar, and that's referring to a pit or an ox, it's not really so. The word shar is really a concept of a shar, and we use the shar as a paradigm of that concept, or bar as a concept. For example, what conceptualizes shar is the fact that it's alive, it moves, and it goes out and damages. A bar, on the other hand, is not alive, it's inanimate, it doesn't move, and it doesn't go out and damage. So in the case of a shar, we're talking about hamazik holech etzel hanizak. In the case of a bar, we're talking about the nizak holech etzel hamazik. And those are fundamentally different kinds of concepts in avos nezikin. The Gemara itself is going to point out that if there are avos, then there must be toldos. And the Gemara is going to analyze whether the toldos have the same din and the same limitations as the av. And in that sense, avos and toldos is a perfect analogy to avos and toldos in Shabbos, because in Shabbos, there's no difference between a tolda and an av. Or shall we say no? A tolda is a radical breakaway from the av, and it has different halachas. For example, in the case of shein v'regel, we're going to talk about something called tzroros. And tzroros is a whole different concept. In tzroros, you only pay chatzi nezek. And it's regardless of whether it's a shartam or a sharmur. Then we have hamaver vehahever. Of those two, the one that's pretty clear is hever. Hever is the same as eish. And once again, we have an inanimate object, but yet it moves. It spreads. And the nizak is caught by the mazik. So there's a certain similarity between bar and hever, but the fundamental difference between the two is whereas in bar, the nizak comes to the mazik, in hever, the mazik comes to the nizak. But in both cases, we're talking about an inanimate object. What's unique about eish on the list of the four is that it's clearly something that has to be guarded very carefully, otherwise it spreads by its very nature. And then we get to maveh. Maveh is very unclear. The Gemara is going to have a major debate about what maveh is. For our purposes now, in interpreting the Mishnah, we're going to assume that maveh is shein. And even though shein applies to a shar, and a shar has teeth, and a shar eats, I don't know if a shar eats more or less than other animals, but nevertheless, what's unique about shein and why it separates itself from shar as a separate av is that the mazik is by definition enjoying and benefiting from the hezek. So it's not a pure act of hezek. The word hezek means damage or destruction, loss. And normally, let's say if we take, for example, hever as a classic example of consumption, the act of consumption is one of destruction. But in the case of mave, insofar as mave is shen, then we're not talking about an act of destruction. The destruction is sort of a secondary outcome of the hezek. So just to summarize, each one of the four avos has its own unique characteristic and its own unique dinim. The Mishnah goes on to say, Lo arei ashor karei amave, lo arei amave karei ashor, v'lo zeh v'zeh sheyesh behem ruach chayim, karei ha'esh she'ein bo ruach chayim, v'lo zeh v'zeh she'darkam leilech u'lahazik haribor, she'ein darko leilech u'lahazik. So the Mishnah points out that each one of the avos nezikin is unique and separates itself from another of hamazik. So, for example, the mave is different than a shar, and the Gemara is going to explain why. And both of them together have something in common that is different than eish. Eish meaning hever. So in both cases of shar and mave, we're talking about an animate object, meaning an animal, that has life to it, animate. It's animated. And you put those two together and you won't be able to produce hever, because hever is, otherwise known as eish, is ein bo ruach chayim. It's not an animate object, it's a gas, if you will. And the Gemara is going to talk about eish as a davar shein bo mamish. It has no substance to it. And not only that, but you could put bar in a category of its own, because both shar, mave, and hever, all three together, are darkon leilech lahazik, which means that the mazik captures or goes to the nizak. And bar is just the opposite. The nizak goes to the mazik. Hatzad shavash behen. So what is the lowest common denominator that connects and combines all four of us nezikim? They are all things that are darkon lahazik. Now, this is a bit of a problem when we take up mave. Although shar is certainly an aggressive animal, especially if left unguarded, if left in the sun, and there's something called negicha. Negicha is an aggressive act. In the case of mave, as we said earlier, it's not really darkon leilech lahazik. The animal is just simply eating. But what the Mishnah probably has in mind is darkon lahazik means that if the animal is uncontained and allowed to roam around, it will certainly eat in any pasture that it finds food. So that makes it darkon lahazik. And I would mention here, since we're moving on in Sefer Bereishis in the Kriya of the Parshios, that in Parshas Chayisara, about 2 weeks around, we're going to have a case of the Gemalim of Avram Avinu in the story of Lavan, and there the Ramban is going to argue that with regard to the camels of Avram, it's not darkon leilech lahazik, meaning it would not cross over Avram's boundary to eat in Yenam's field. That's going to be the Ramban's chiddush, and he derives it with a kal v'chomer from Chamorosh of Pinchas ben Yoyer. In any event, and shmiras on alecha. Shmiras on alecha means that you have bailus, and your bailus of a mazik over a mazik generates a chiyuv shmira. And if you don't fulfill your chiyuv shmira, then you're going to pay compensation for any nezek that results from your lack of shmira. And Reb Chaim Brisker was very famous as saying that in nezikin, there's not only a lo taseh, like for example, Rabbeinu Yonah says that if you mazik someone, you violate lo sigzol. Says Reb Chaim, there's also an essay, a mitzvah aseh called shmiras alecha, that you have to watch and guard and protect and limit the movement of a mazik, and that is a mitzvah aseh. We're going to soon see that there are certain cases of dangerous mazikin where bailus is prohibited, and you have to just destroy the object. It's so dangerous. What else is common to all of us nazikin? Shehizik chav hamazik l'shalim. Okay, this we know. Nazikin is about not only indirectly causing a mazik, but also paying for the mazik, and that's called compensation. However, the Mishnah adds a very important point, and that is that chav l'shalem tashlumei nezik b'meitav haaretz, and this is called meitav. Meitav is otherwise known as idis, and you'll see that in Rashi here, because karka in general is subdivided into three categories. The best quality karka is called idis, and in the case of a mazik, the Torah requires that you pay from idis. And generally speaking, a person who's being compensated, namely the nizak, would prefer to get a smaller tract of land as payment than a larger tract of land if the smaller tract of land is idis. So that even though when you evaluate both idis and ziburis being the lowest quality of karka, you'll come up with the same number. And in fact, the karka of idis keneged the ziburis is a smaller tract of land. Nevertheless, on the market, people desire a smaller tract of idis above and beyond the larger tract of beinidis or ziburis. The Gemara says the following: anytime you see the word avos in the Mishnah, we're going to see a number of examples, it always indicates that there are toldos. But the question here in Nezikin is a very fundamental question. Toldos say kayotzaben or lav kayotzaben. Does it mean that the toldos have the same din as the av, with the same rules of compensation? Or does a tolda mean that it has a unique din and it differs from the av? Gabi Shabbos Tanan Avos Malachas Arbaim Chasarachas Avos Mechaldika Toldos Toldos Sev Kayotzebem. In the case of Avos and Toldos of Shabbos, there are 40, which really means 39 Avos in Shabbos, all of which are derived from a smichus to the Mishkan. In the Mishkan, there were 39 labor categories to build the Mishkan. And the law in Shabbos is that the tolda of the Av has the same din as the Av. What does that mean? Loshna Av, Chatos, if he violates the Av, Bishogeg. Shogeg meaning one of two things. Excuse me. Either it means that he forgot it was Shabbos, or it might mean that he never learned the laws of Shabbos. And Loshna Tolda Chatos, if he violates a Tolda. For example, Molechet Zorea means he puts a seed into the ground. And Mashkes Roya means there's already a seed in the ground, and on Shabbos he waters the seed. In both cases, he does Matzmiach, and therefore in both cases the same agenda or purpose of the Malacha to cause Hatzmacha. And if he does so, and he's Mashkes Roya on Shabbos B'Shogeg, either because he didn't remember it was Shabbos, or because he never learned that Mashkes Roya is also on Shabbos, he brings a karma chatos. Furthermore, lo shna av skila, lo shna tolda skila. If he implemented the av or it's told him amazing, then he's chayav skila. Again, there has to be asra. Umay ika bein tolda bein av tolda. So why do you bother calling something a tolda to differentiate it from an av if at the same time all the dinim are exactly the same? You're just confusing us. And the Gemara answers no. There is an afkamina. The ilu avich avos badi adad. If he does both kotzer and zorea with one shichacha, one halama, meaning he forgot that it was Shabbos, and he did two different malachas, and he did the avos. In Avishtei toldos badi adadi, if he violates two toldos from two different avos. That means, for example, In the case of Dash, he was Mefaret. And in the case of Zoreah, he was Mashkez Roim. And he did both Disha and Hashkaz Roim. With one Shichach, one Halom Shabbos is Mechayev HaKol Chadav V'Chad. He has to bring 2 Chatos. 1 Chatos for each Avera. Because every Av is a separate Avera. There are 39 different Averos that are included under Kol Malachalos Hasa. And with regard to Toldos, each Told of a different Av is a separate Avera. If you have an Av Told of the day, but if he violates Behelam Achas, both the Av and its Tolda, he was Oreah and Mashkez Roim in one Shichacha, Lo Machayv Elachada. He's basically violating the same Avera twice. So, for example, in Masechet Krisus, we have the laws of Shkagos. If he ate Dam and Chelev, both of which incur Achiv Karis B'Mezid, but he did them to Shogig, he has to bring 2 Chatos. If, on the other hand, he were to eat a Kezayis of Chelev and then eat another Kezayis of Chelev, he would only bring 1 Chatos, because there's no Chiluk in the Shem Malacha. And then we have Gufin Mechulakim, Shemos Mechulakim. A lot of this is in the Daf Yomi for today, in Kiddush and Daf Ayin Zayin. In any event, Ula Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Eliezer Mechayva told him, Makom Av, Amai Koile Av, Amai Koile told him. Rabbi Eliezer understood that the Tolda separates itself as a separate Isur. And therefore, if you do an Av and it's Tolda in one Halama, one Shichacha, for example, he plants a seed, and he waters a seed that's already in the garden on Shabbos with 1 Halama, 1 Shichacha. How many Chatos does he bring? He brings 2 Chatos. Because Rabbi Eliezer holds that the Tolda is a separate Isur. Is therefore my Koile Av, my Koile Tolda? And the Gemara answers, Hacht Av Mishkan Chashivi Koile Av, Hacht Lav Mishkan Chashivi Koile Tolda. So there were certain malachas that were done in the Mishkan. From then, we categorized 39 avos. We derived Toldos, which are similar, not in the Pu'ula, but in the Totzas HaPu'ula, the ultimate agenda and goal. And one we call an Av, and one we call a Tolda. And the Gemara doesn't seem to come up with any sort of an afkamina between an Av and a Tolda, according to Rabbi Eliezer. However, some of the Rishonim want to say that even according to Rabbi Eliezer, there would be an afkamina with regard to Hasra, which would mean that you could give Hasra on the Tolda B'Shem Av, but you got to get the Av right. And if you mistakenly give Hasra for the wrong Av, then he's potter. Gabi Tumos. Now we go on to another category in halacha of avos and toldos. Tanan, we have a Mishnah in Masechet Kelim, avos hatumos, and the Mishnah goes ahead and lists, enumerates all the avos in tuma, hasheretz, vashich vazora,